Welcome to another edition of NetStruc Talks. It's your host, Sharon Leid, and I am excited to bring on a special guest today. Now, when you think about using sponsorship to fund your events, it can be tricky. It also can be a little difficult if you do not know the language. Stay tuned. I will be talking with an expert who helps sponsor seekers seek and keep sponsors. Stay tuned. Welcome to NetStruc Talks. I am your host, Sharon Leid, and I have a special guest here today, and all my guests are special, but I have this young lady here, Roberta Vigilance, who is going to talk about sponsorship for your events. How do you get it? How do you keep it? What is the language? Because there is a language in this whole type of industry, and just to really learn more about it. I mean, people really need this type of information because people are doing events all day, every day. Am I correct, Roberta? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sharon, so much for having me. It's a great, it's a pleasure. And you're absolutely correct. People are always seeking sponsors or sponsorship funding for their events. I believe now more so than yesterday, I should say. But we can, yeah. And the reason, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. But you're right, though, because it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And even since the pandemic, people had to get creative, in terms of getting sponsorship for events because, people still needed to do, still needed to get their brand out there. They still needed to get events and just get information out there. So sponsorship is really, really important. But what I want you to really briefly talk about is, people say sponsorship, they throw that word all over the place. What really is a sponsorship event, like a sponsored event?
A sponsored event, Sharon, is an event that's funded by a sponsor, right? So people do throw the word out, as you mentioned. So a lot of time people say, well, I'm going to secure the sponsorship. But my thing is that you have to secure the sponsor, which is the supporter, which is the entity that's given the funding. You have to secure that entity first before you can get the sponsorship, which is the funding part of things. Mm-hmm. And once you understand the lingo, it's going to be a game changer because now you're speaking to professionals and you know what you're speaking about. And when they ask certain questions, you know how to answer those questions as well.
Right. And you've been in this industry for how many years now? I mean, on your own, you've been in this industry.
My gosh, now you want me to tell? I started since in the late 90s.
Okay.
From planning events and looking for money for those events, and that's when I started with sponsorship. Right, mm-hmm. So I'm self-taught. I didn't learn this in school or my neighborhood or anything like that. And it's just when the word sponsorship came to me as I was seeking money for it. I just leveraged that with my background in sales. So in the late 90s mm-hmm. is when I established my events planning company, and I just made things official with planning to sponsoring events and securing sponsors.
And that's important. And I'm sorry, I didn't want to, make you go way back like that. But this has been since the late 90s. And some people really come up to think that this is new. This is something that's, new and innovative and, they're going to, secure the bag with a sponsor. But there's some techniques to this. And, you started back then, but, you have over a decade of doing this with B2C and B2B companies. Mm-hmm. When you started, you had no connections. How did that work from you having no connections to now you are an expert, being a consultant, helping businesses secure thousands and thousands of dollars for their events?
Pretty much starting with no contacts just means that imagine this, you're looking for money and you just don't know really where to look. So my sales background contributed a lot, because in sales, I knew to go to business to get, our contracts and to get what we need. And they also had the money. So I just used that common sense and say, I'm having this event. Like my first show was called the Entertainment Industry Network Seminar, right? So that target musicians and models. I looked for companies. I thought of companies actually that wanted to connect with my demographic. And I'm like, okay, so they have the money that I need. So I went to those companies. I started with local, Sharon. I started with the ones who were in my neighborhood, like the record labels and I remember I did another event, and I had Eggie's Shipping, which was a company. The owner was from Guyana, and my background is from there. So we knew each other, and I'm like, okay, I can introduce you to this audience. So I started from the local level before I went into the, started to get Adidas. Corporate. Yeah.
That's so important. And that's the same rule with PR. I tell clients, start with your local media platforms first, because they are always more in tune to deal with the locals, to deal with what's going on within the local community. They're more, it's more attractive to them than the main big stream ones. And it's much easier to get in contact with them. So it's kind of similar in terms of with PR, because your locals are going to be more interested in you quicker than the mainstream.
Absolutely. And you also remember you have a relationship with them, and you know what they want already, because either you frequent their businesses or if you've heard, about them. So right. It's a much easier sell. But I must say this, just like with PR, I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but with sponsorship, you must return some type of value, whether it's the good content, whether it's new customers, you have to return value, because you don't want to take from that small business and don't return anything. In addition to, some of these people know you, and you make these promises and don't deliver, it can get kind of sketchy.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. So in turn with PR, the return on value really is giving back that information, giving value in content and information to their listening audience. So it's, you're giving them something that their listening audience does not know, or, building off of that so they could be well educated and well informed. So that's their return back on and bringing back the value. But, in terms of the locals, and I want to focus on that a little bit, only because it's a vetted interest for them.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah.
And just going back to what you said, with giving your audience something that you don't know, you might, within the sponsorship realm, you might have a section that you can help the local business, right? Or I'm going to call them the local sponsor, because they are a prospective sponsor. You can give them something that they haven't thought about, right? So, for example, when I did the Entertainment Industry Network Seminar, my target audience, again, musicians and talents, but it was also the American sector. So I went to a record label which only targeted at that time the reggae sector. They didn't know that, or maybe thought about at that time that, I can cross over to to the American market. So the sponsorship opportunity offered that to them, again, giving them value, something that they didn't think of. So I can only imagine how that relates to providing that type of story being published in a newspaper at that time. But again, I was self-taught. I didn't think about, having the media cover this type of news story. Right.
Absolutely. So we talked about the locals, tap into your locals before you actually tap into the mainstream, because you get more they get more value, you get more value. But you also mentioned something in your bio about the language. And, I revert back to PR. There is a language, there's an angle, there is a particular way in how we can capture the interests of a journalist or any type of press platform. for them to say, you know what, I want to interview you? What is the type of language that in this industry, in the sponsorship industry, what is that type of language?
The language that you must use is words like just knowing your stuff, like sponsor and sponsorship seeker. And if you were to, let's say you're doing your own research and you read something about a sponsorship deal where the property failed or the property helped the sponsor achieve the goal, the property meaning the sponsorship seeker, the person who's seeking sponsorship, right? So those are like common words. When I started, just to go back a little, changing my language is what opened up the door for me. Right? I used to use the word invest, and that's when corporate brands started to slam the doors, because I was asking, because in my community, I started off saying invest.
Right.
But
that's
I didn't
what we usually use when we're talking with clients. You don't say you pay, it's an investment in your business. So it's different from when you're dealing in sponsorship?
It's different when you're dealing in sponsorship. That's correct. Because with invest, what they thought was I was going to like flip the money, but I didn't. The way I explained it to them, I never said I was going to flip their money. I said things like, I'll put you in front of your demographic, or I do a crossover audience. But the only word I knew at that time, Sharon, was invest. Until that word sponsorship came to me, maybe I learned it along the way. Obviously, maybe when I, went to corporate, I thought it was Beth at Adidas, but I'm like, no, after I thought about this yesterday, some more. But when I learned that word and I went into the corporate brands and I asked them to sponsor my event, like everything changed. Remember, I come from a sales background, so I already had my proposal, that was already good. I just needed to tweak it and change up the language. So it's very important. A huge red flag when I'm working with someone and they come to me and say, hey, I'm looking to secure sponsorship. So I listen. I'm like, okay, maybe, the word is I get what they're saying. But when they use words like I'm looking, I want them to donate, it's a huge red flag that the person does not really have a sense of what event sponsorship is and probably how event sponsorship works.
You say that, and it's so funny as you're talking, that was the first time what I realized, that when you are looking for funding or sponsorship, you do not say donate, because they're looking at it in a different framework, in a different mindset than sponsorship. They're not looking at it in terms of that they're going to get their return back on investment. They're looking that they just give this, that's a donation, it's a tax write-off, and those are two separate entities.
Absolutely. And then if you're a nonprofit and you're still saying donation, then I know that, definitely something is wrong. Tax write-off, you can offer the sponsor a write-off. You can say you're a 501c3 or any other type of nonprofit. You can tell them that for sure and allow them to do a tax write-off. But again, if you don't have a nonprofit and you are using such words, then that's a red flag that you don't know your stuff when it comes to sponsorship.
And I'm glad you mentioned that also, because I was just about to ask, can you secure sponsorship if you are not a 501c3 or if you're not a nonprofit?
Absolutely. My company is not a 501c3. I'm a for-profit company. When I started and up to today, still am a for-profit. So it doesn't matter. You can be. Also, I just want to add this. Even as a student, my real estate course that was sponsored. Even individuals can secure sponsors. Even students, as I was a student then, I was able to secure sponsors. So you can be a nonprofit, for-profit, and also an individual.
No, that's very important, because I know some people say, oh, you know what? I don't have a non-for-profit, so I can't secure sponsorship. So I'm just going to rely on ticket sales. And both you and I know with events, especially if you have a large target of who you want to get, to purchase tickets, sometimes that can fall by the wayside. And now what? And so you're funding this whole entire event out of your pocket when you really could have just, put something together, reach out to you and learn and get the consulting for and start getting some real consulting training in how to secure a real sponsor for their events. So you have two books, actually. You have one book that you said that it is the how to secure sponsors successfully. So that's the first edition, and then we also have the third edition. I don't have the second edition, but talk to us about the difference between the two.
Okay, so the first one, I first released How to Secure Sponsors Successfully in 2005. This was on MySpace. I released it as an ebook, right? And the whole, the core of the book is to explain what sponsorship is, how event sponsorship works, how to approach sponsors, what information to include in your sponsorship proposal. Like, that was the gist. I just wanted to share that information so other people can get funding and for their events like I did. That was all that was about. Mm-hmm. And then as the year went by, 2008, it became something serious. Like, people took an interest in it. And I'm like, okay, let me buckle down and get this book together. So the first edition, I polished it up more between 2005 to 2008. I continued to learn. I just learning a whole bunch from experience, from insight as well, and from reading other articles, not necessarily on sponsorship, but just other business stuff. And I'm like, you know what, this can work in sponsorship as well. So the first edition focuses on three parts, which is understanding sponsorship, which is communicating with sponsors, and the third is selling, which is what information to put into your sponsorship proposal. And it's also a sample proposal there. Now, there's a second one in between there. If you go to the website, it'll take you there. But the third edition, it has the same information as the first, plus it has a metric in there that shows both sponsorship seekers and sponsors how to evaluate the sponsorship success before you submit it to the sponsor. And it helped the sponsors evaluate the sponsorship before they actually approve the sponsorship. So it's a really good metric. And then also the third edition, there's some coaching questions, because I used to do coaching. And then, I used to do coaching. And I had this client, he's awesome. You should charge 4 figures. And I had this client, and I was like, listen, I'm kind of done with the coaching stuff. Like, the coaching was to get clients from where they are in the sponsorship, especially if they have more than one event that they're looking to seek funding for. I would coach them along to choosing one, the question that I ask, and then get them to choose that one, and then get them into starting to secure sponsors. So I asked the client, I said, listen, it's kind of like sometimes you're forcing someone to take action, and I didn't want to do that. Mm-hmm. So I said, can I put these questions? I know y'all charge you 4 figures, but can I put these questions, if you don't mind, in the book? And, obviously the book is not 4 figures. And then when I got his support, his approval on that, he was like, go ahead. Then I knew I was doing the right thing. So in the third edition revised, it has the coaching questions that will guide readers from where they are or from the beginning stage through securing sponsors. So the third edition has that, plus it has an additional book in there, which is a step-by-step guide to planning a sponsored event. 9 steps that new event planners usually make so they can avoid those common steps.
Absolutely. No. And that's very important for people to have some type of content that they can actually just revert to get some assistance if they cannot connect with you on a one-on-one or with your membership. So I know you have a membership for folks that is looking to get this consultation and get this assistance, and pretty much, holding the hand a little to get their sponsorship secured. Talk to us about this membership.
Oh, I love the membership. The membership is absolutely what you just said, Sharon, is working alongside with members to help them either secure sponsors or to help them keep their sponsors. Also for those, let's say, you have your sponsors and you're looking to offer your sponsors more, you want to maximize the sponsorship, come to me. Let me be your on-call sponsorship professional who you could ask questions, so you can get feedback. You write a sponsorship proposal, you want someone to review it, I'll do that for you. I'll look it over. And the membership is different plans. We can meet once per month, we can meet 4 times per month, we can do back and forth email unlimited times, totally up to you. But the goal again is to help you achieve your sponsorship goals. And I love the membership.
Doing it. No, and again, I always say that, holding the hand a little to do that coaching, that consulting, some people, they want to learn how to do it on their own, and that's why I go into PR consulting and PR coaching, is because people want to learn how to do it themselves. Yes. And this is a great opportunity, for businesses, for entrepreneurs, for companies to really sit down and connect with you and get your expertise so they can be that expert sponsorship secured business and, to help fund their events. We've talked about, sponsorship. We talked about, the local companies and so forth like that. Are there specific type of sponsors that you should be tapping into with your events? Like, should it be industry driven, or, how is it that a person can actually think of the type of sponsors for their events?
That's a good question. So I kind of jumped in when you said, are there different types of sponsors? Because yes, right. So we have media sponsors, we have the local sponsors, corporate sponsors, and such forth. Just different types of entities. Again, remember, sponsors are entities, so there are different types of sponsors. Now, when it comes to targeting the right sponsor, is 2 ways to do it, right? One is look at what your event has to offer. Look at your event's audience, and then find brands that your audience are already using. Also, find brands that might be a solution to a problem that your audience has. That's one way. Then, of course, you can just go online and see who is sponsoring the type of events that you're having. So those are 2 ways that I would suggest when it comes to targeting sponsors. For me, I'm the one who would say, let me see what type of brands. I want to call out the brands, right? For example, when I did the Entertainment Industry Network seminar, I knew which brands I wanted to work with according to my demographic. Other people would say, do it the other way. Find out what brands want, what they need. Of course you do that. But the first thing I always believe, Sharon, is just to start with what you have. Because if you go chasing brands, and trying to change up your event just to match a brand, you can get stuck. It's okay to tweak.
You get lost.
You get lost. You forget, you'll forget why you started with this event. Before you know, you probably wouldn't even recognize it. Start with what you have, and then find brands that complements that, and then go to their competitors. Look for competitors as well. Look for local, look outside of the country. What can you offer?
No. Okay. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I know you have so much more in your book, so much more as being a sponsor. As being a member of your, being part of your membership. What last things that you can give to our listeners in terms of, getting sponsorship for the event? What advice would you give them?
Okay. My advice would definitely be understanding the language, because sometimes some sponsorship professionals, they do listen to you when you speak. They do read your proposal, and they look to make sure, because my thing is, if you're not using the right language, that is, as Sharon mentioned, is a red flag that you are not going to offer them that value. The second thing is to believe that you are worthy. Don't ask for less. when you know you need more, because that can throw off the sponsorship. For example, if you know you need, let's say 10K and you're only asking for 5, then where's the other 5K coming from? You're not going to be able to implement your event, and the sponsor who paid that 5K will be stuck. You'll be stuck. Like, next thing is, don't ask for more and offer less, right? You need to offer at minimum the value of the sponsorship, and then pivot, then offer them, more. Always quantify what you're asking for, of course, right? Provide more value to the sponsor. And, just know that getting, sponsorship is not a quick, rich scheme. At times it takes time, 6 months to a year, when you are starting with no contact whatsoever. However, you might have a coworker, or you might have an employer or a buddy that works within a company, or you might know a millionaire who might want to sponsor your event. So with that, when you know someone, you can secure a sponsor within an hour, because you know the person. But it's so important. I think the takeaway today is really understand the language and know how sponsorship works, to speed up the process, and to get what you want is
Right.
most important.
Absolutely. So talk to us. How can folks get in contact with you? They want to learn more about this membership. They want to get your book. How is it folks can get in contact with you? We have it down at the bottom of the screen here.
Absolutely. My website, you can visit me at www.eventsansponsors.com, and you'll find all, my social media there. You'll find links to the book, links to the membership, and also you can contact me if you have any questions. I would love to work with you, help you secure sponsors and keep your sponsors, and even maximize the sponsorship.
Absolutely. Roberta, thank you so much. I appreciate you giving us some of your expertise and some great gems in terms of how you can secure sponsorship and keep sponsorship for your events. You gave us some great information. Thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to seeing you at the next NetStruc Talks. Take care.